19 below.
Did it work?
Well, I started in the garage, you pull it out, and then, yeah, it was
Even
ugly.
in the garage, it said it was that cold.
No, once
Oh.
I pulled it out,
Okay.
in the garage was actually still 5. Yeah, that was a
Man.
tough one.
It's hot in the garage, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice and warm. I sat out there, watch TV with my shorts.
Does it make exercise a real bitch, or like, do you know, how do you guys? Because like, there's a lot of places out here that don't have heat or air, but obviously out there, I mean, can you even have a gym that wouldn't have heat?
No, not even. No,
You
it's
can't.
not possible.
You're gonna
Yeah.
die.
No, yeah. You could die.
Yeah,
Especially,
yeah, you could literally die.
Yeah. Good luck. I mean, if your car breaks down and you're a couple miles away and it's 19 below and you don't have good clothes, yeah, you got a problem.
Yeah. How long you been a strength coach for?
Been out at the University of Minnesota about 19 years, probably 23, 24 years total.
Shit. So you
Yeah.
must have figured out some stuff, because otherwise they'd fire you, right?
I've fooled a lot of people.
You've
I know.
been tricking people.
Yeah, I've been tricking them. Yeah, I've been very fortunate in Minnesota to stay there that long and build a lot of good things there. I think I've helped change some of the profession, and it's where I want to stay. Hopefully, it's not my choice sometimes. At Division I athletics, they tell you to just take a hike for no reason.
Yeah.
Right. So, I have been fortunate. So, I keep working. I've worked a number of sports, 12 different teams. My first year, I tell people I've coached over 200 seasons.
Shit.
Because each year, like first year I was there, I coached 12
Wow.
teams, right? And I use that from the perspective of leadership to see different types of coaching styles, right? So I've been fortunate to have great coaches, maybe not so great coaches, or they were great in one area and weak in another, and I was able to assess that and see that. So it was good for my coaching experience to see that with all my coaching years, not even just there, but a couple other places, I've seen well over 200 seasons of coaching.
So when you say that, like how it's influenced you, like who has influenced you? You don't necessarily say who they are, but the way that they coached or what they did, how did it change, or make you realize you needed to do something different with the kids, or add something, subtract something from your program?
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate to see like a Jay Robinson at the University of Minnesota, a wrestling coach that won a few national championships, Coach Brock Lesnar, obviously, and a number where he was an old Ranger mentality, right? But the respect these kids had for him, it was, even nowadays kids would, even late in his career, he was pretty hardcore, and yet the respect that the kids knew he cared. You know what I mean? That was the thing. Like, sure, I've probably made mistakes and maybe haven't handled a kid probably the best in a situation where they maybe have been screwing up. But if the kid he knew I cared about him, even though he was in the wrong, and then maybe I said, hey, that's not right. We got to, this is the situation. I'm going to throw you out of the workout. Maybe I shouldn't have. He understood, though, I cared about him, bottom line. You know what I mean? And I think that's where a lot of coaches, that's one thing I learned and I've always cared about the kids. That's why I'm in this profession.
Right.
It wasn't about me. It's about me helping people. I like to walk into the arena and say, look at the other team and go, you're not good enough to beat us. You know what I mean? That's what I like that situation.
It's unique to be in a position to help people, but to take it in the direction that you've taken it. I have a lot of respect for it, because you are very open-minded to, interjecting some of these things that you believe are true and that are going to help people. But you also have probably burst your own bubble over the years and probably have changed your own beliefs to arrive at some of these things that you have now, which is great, because that's how we end up with knowledge, is we end up kind of poking holes in some old concepts.
Well, I've stumbled upon a formula that helps me create stuff. So, I may speak somewhere and I give 3 things in a 40-minute presentation, and people are like, how do you come up with this? They don't know the 100 failures, right? Before I went through 100 things that got no response. And
Like,
finally,
I'm up here today because I sucked at a lot of things for a long time.
a long time, right? Yeah. And then here's the one thing that I do, I think, that helps me create stuff. Let's say I came up with Triphasic or some other method. I question everything about that method, right? Which then creates problems in falseness of the solution. I create a solution, or it creates a problem. I find a problem that I didn't even know I had if I question everything I do. And then I try to create solutions to make it better. And that's my formula. So I question everything I do, which creates problems I didn't know I had. and then I just find a solution. And that's where the good stuff seems to come in.
And this comes from great researchers and great science, and like a lot of people have utilized these methods, but we just don't see it as much in strength, and we don't see it as much in the fitness community.
Right. I know with the sporting world, I'm more popular in because it's very specific stuff, right? And even though, we can get into triphasic's not sport specific, but it helps you become sport specific later. Like when I was developing triphasic, one of my coaches, my track coach who helped me develop this whole thing, was willing to say, hey, we're going through the isometric phase and our kids' 20-yard dash or flying 20s are getting slower. And he was okay with it because we're training. This is a training period. And he hopes they were super compensating later. And that's what happened is they got great levels of super compensation 4 weeks after we finished the heavy isometric phase that were actually making them slower.
Right.
You know what I mean? So coaches that were willing to hang in there with me during this whole process and believe in, hey, and if it can't be that bad, even if they're getting slower, we'll get them faster at some other time. You know what I mean? So to be able to measure all this stuff and things that I've created over the years is not just me. I mean, everything I create is a combination of my assistants, my friends, the poor athletes that I've trained, right? I mean, I look at, a friend of mine, Hank Kranoff, a track coach out of Holland, sprint coach. Every workout is a biological experiment is the way you have to look at it, right? So everything you learn from, and then you build on the next thing. And people like the way I undulate my weekly model in triphasic. But I stumbled upon it because there was with the baseball team, there was a Thursday night beer and wing night, right? And when they came in Friday, I couldn't go heavy.
Right.
I just did high volume, lower loads that day and just worked the crap out of them. Right. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't just all science. Like a beer and wing night dictated that high volume day on Fridays. So it seemed to work the best then with their training.
But I think that really speaks to kind of who you are and kind of the fact that you don't let your ego get in the way of things where you're like, no, this is written on the piece of paper. Do this. You're more reactive when kids kind of come to you or not only when they start with you, you're like, okay, well, what do you have? What do we need to add, subtract, get better, take care of? And then it's also like, hey, man, I know you're going out and getting hammered on Thursday with wings. If I try and hammer you and try and punish you, it's not going to fix anything. You deal with these kids as if you're like, hey, I know what you're doing. I'll adjust as long as you give me the effort and you do this today. When you come in hammered and hungover, I'll kind of understand and do this. I think that takes a real belief in what you have in your intelligence, and then also understanding, and that also creates a ton of buy-in for the kids because they do see even more like, oh, Cal's cool, man. He cares. He doesn't care that we got hammered and ate 60 wings last night.
Yeah.
He actually let us not throw up in the morning. Like we're gonna actually push when he actually asks us to push.
Yeah, and that's basically a bodybuilding method, high volume day, where I'd use to flush them out a little bit. But they were tired from the Monday, Tuesday workouts that were high intense, heavy, and then Friday was a little bit lower load and higher volume. So they'd work, but it wasn't like it was that intensity because I wasn't going to get anything out of intensity at that point.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
For a lot of the listeners who probably haven't heard or don't know what triphasic training is, can you explain just some of the few concepts so that they'll be able to follow along with what you're talking about?
So when we talk about triphasic, it's really 3 phases, right? That's basically pretty simple. And the phases are essentially, the first phase was eccentric phase. So when you do your bench press, you're going to use a heavy weight and you're going to go slow and controlled down, maybe 3 to 5, 6 seconds, whatever you want to do, just slower than normal, right? So that and what that does is it damages the muscle. It tears the small muscle heads apart, the actin myosin head, not that we need to get into that, and it causes a huge immune system response in the blood. So the white blood cells go up. Sounds horrible, right? But what you're doing is destroying tissue that actually gets rebuilt in the next couple weeks so that you make that tissue stronger and it remodels it. And that's done for 2 weeks. And really, if you train 3-4 times a week, if you're going to do bench press, you do 4 eccentric bench presses workouts in a matter of 2 weeks, and that's all it is really. And then the next 2 weeks we do the isometric phase of training, okay? And that's where you bring the bar down just off your chest, you hold it isometrically for roughly 3 to 5 seconds per rep, and then you press it up. And these weights are heavy, so you actually wouldn't be able to, most people can't press it up themselves, so they need a spotter to help them up, right? Okay. And then so that's the next 2 weeks, and you can take a week off in between. It doesn't matter. And then you just work on the next week would be just the normal weights, going heavy, going fast, going light, do some power. You can jump to bands, chain training, whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Triphasic's not a program. It's just concepts that people put in any program it works. I mean, from junior high coaches, even it's Triphasic really works when you use heavy weight. But even junior high coaches have come to me and say, Cal, I use Triphasic. I'm like, oh, no, you didn't, not at junior high level, right? But they're like, no, I just did lightweight. But the kids seem to learn the squat pattern better by using that slow and controlled method. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, and look, I have an open door policy, and people come from all over the world to watch my gym, see my gym. I had 4 coaches last year from out of the country. And some people walk in and will never ask me why I do stuff. They just watch. And they'll see that single leg safety bar squat with a guy over there squatting on his toes on a single leg bar with 800 pounds and think I'm the craziest mother in the whole world.
You said squatting on his toes?
Single leg squat on his toes.
On it.
Yep. And we'll do with a floating heel. We should say floating heel, yes.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And then they see my athletes jump on their toes. And the reason they jump on their toes is I watched sports for many years and couldn't see one athlete performing on their heels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did it today. He showed me the exercise today. And when he's showing me, even with just the bar, I'm like, that is going to crush my knees. Didn't hurt at all.
Right.
I got up to 3 plates, moved it around very easy, and obviously I could have gone a lot heavier.
Yeah, and he was moving at like 40%.
Yeah.
So when I said you could probably do 700 today, he'd be like, no way. And then he started put 3 plates on, and it was just boom, 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 pinging off the ground. You're like, yeah, there's 7 plates in him today. Single leg safety bar squat. And it's really a good hack.
Your other leg is behind you. You know, it's not like up on a bench,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so it your other leg is part of the exercise as well.
Well, the point to that is when I actually put athletes' legs up on a bench with heavy loads, I actually found it kind of screwed up their hips a little bit. So
Yeah, I bet.
the first day I did that, and I'm not saying the rear
That is
foot
bad, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying that lifts bad. I'm saying that lifts bad under super heavy loads with your foot up on the bench. Because a chiro came to me and said, Cal, everybody seemed to be out of place today. And I went, okay, we got a problem.
Yeah.
Right? So then I dropped my ego and I
Right.
switched it and I put the foot on the floor. We haven't had a problem since.
I liked what you were saying, though, about it gives you an opportunity to allow the athletes to overload. And then we talked about a lot of times when it comes to high-level athletes, people are so scared. They like don't want to mess them up because it's like LeBron James is already a great athlete, so I don't want him going. You know, I'm going to have him squat 225, right? And so I like what you said because you're like, this gives us an opportunity to still overload, still handle a big weight, and then you kept explaining why we were doing it that way and in that fashion. And you said some of the girls, they might only want to squat when they do a regular squat. They only feel comfortable squatting about 2 plates. But on the exercise that you were showing me, once they adapt to it, once they get used to it, they might use 355.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a 135-pound girl, 130-pound, who doesn't want to squat more than 225, but she'll throw 365 on her single leg and do super maximal loading, and it's a hack. And then I tell people one of the huge benefits we've seen with some scientific stuff, not only did I see a sports performance transfer, but in the DEXA scans, my females had some of the highest bone density they've ever seen to date.
Andrew, see if you can find a clip of it on Cal's. He has a YouTube channel. See if you can. That way, the listeners or people that are watching can see what the hell we're talking about
that
here.
safety bar.
How much of a pushback do you normally get from, say, a visiting strength coach, or maybe someone who isn't necessarily hasn't seen some of your stuff, and they see you do this stuff? And I mean, how do you get those people who look at it and go like, "Oh, come on, man"?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get that buy-in? Do you
I don't care, but
you
go
well,
ahead.
no.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? I mean, how do you,
Yeah.
like, and I completely understand that you don't care. You're like, look, it works.
Right.
This is, just look at what we have here. This works. But what's your easiest way to try and get people to start to understand it? Is it just like, hey, you got to feel this. Hey, you got to see this. So
Yeah.
this is what we're talking about here, Nsima.
Okay.
Are we gonna let this play, or we do?
Yeah, we'll let it play for a second. Yeah. So you're trying to have the athlete shift forward onto the knee, and the heel is raised a little bit.
Yep.
Oh, I like that they even have. So is that normally how you do it with the
Yeah,
pad there? So
With
that
the
way
pad,
they
just
feel
in case. Yep.
they feel the leg hit the ground.
If they need to hit the ground, and then we have the spotters obviously on the side. So that lift is exactly what we would do. And actually that one we'd probably have him push his knee a little bit far forward. Okay, and then because he can support that.
I like the way he really exploded up.
Yeah.
He's doing a good eccentric too.
Yep.
And with that eccentric, are you trying to have the athlete control it all the way down? Because at
Yep.
the last like fifth, he kind of like
it doesn't really matter. That's just a little drop to help him get it up. Yeah, it's
Okay.
kind of a stretch reflex. The focus is that during the eccentric phase, we've done all the damage by having the muscle contracted, and then he lowers and he's stretching that muscle apart. So that's where the damaging part comes in.
Yeah, and you were saying you want the athlete to be in such control that they can reverse at any time.
Yeah, in that position for sure. Yeah, for sure. And then the big thing is with that is that I've seen huge adaptations hormonally, like testosterone shoots through the roof because you're using super maximal loading on one leg. So when you have, if Mark did it today with 700 pounds on his back with one leg, like there's a lot of stress. The growth hormone gets released. It's pretty crazy, the stuff. And that's the thing that I think, as Mark mentioned, that most people are worried about hurting people. I've done this lift for 7 years super maximally, and I've never had one injury from it. And yet it's a safe way to load our athletes. And like I talk about bone density, why is that important? That's just an overall general indicator of your overall general health of all your tissues. Let's be honest. Old people, what do they lose? They lose bone density, and then they start losing everything. You know what I'm saying? So it's just a way, like we're designed to handle stress and adapt to stress. And to me, like that's the big thing. And to your point in regards to coaches walking in, yeah, I think I've had coaches walk in and like, you can't squat on your toes like nobody else does. I'm like, it's okay. You know what I mean? And the hard part is that some of it, and look, none of the training that we do is wrong. I'm just telling you, this is more optimal for athletes is what I found through my experiences.
Right.
You know, not that you can't back squat with your weight on your heels. You should back squat with your weight on your heels, right?
Some of what you were showing us, like when you were saying, like if you're on your toes and you're doing a single leg movement, I want people to be able to picture this. So for me, if I drive my knee forward and I try to keep my heel on the ground, especially in like a split squat, right? My heel is going to come off the ground because I have a limited range of motion through my ankle, calf, Achilles tendon, or whatever, right? Then that puts a crazy amount of stress on my knee, and my knee will hurt. But with what you showed me today, I was able to drive my knee forward because my heel was slightly off the ground. Yep. The calf and all that stuff didn't have to stretch nearly as much, and so it worked great, and I want people to understand when they're listening to this, because they're probably like, that's going to hurt really bad.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I thought it was going to kill. But you also have athletes, when they do a regular squat, a back squat, they keep their heels on the ground.
Yes,
right?
of course. Yeah, of course. And the thing I switched that over with, honestly, it started about 14 years ago. I was walking through the gym. I was watching basketball practice, and one of the top rebounders in the Big Ten, they were doing a rebounding drill, and I watched the whole time when that ball went up, hit the rim, was coming back down. He was never on his heels ever. And I'm teaching people how various organizations show them to push your butt back and land on your heels, and then they'd shift forward and get to their toes and jump up. I'm like, why are we ever going to our heels? That's not what he does nobody was rebounding these basketballs on their heels. I'm like, I'm gonna pull landing on my heels or getting on my heels when we jump out of all my training programs. We did, no knee pain. 7 years later, which was 7 years ago, I started squatting, doing lunges. Everything was on my balls of my feet.
Plyos and stuff. Right?
Everything.
On both feet? On the balls of both feet?
Yeah. Either or whether you're doing a one-legged or two-legged, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Okay.
Most of my stuff is done on the balls of your feet, because when we run, we only run on our toes. Okay. I watch sports. Your heel may hit, but that's only because that you haven't completely stopped the force, but you don't perform on your heels in any way. I used to say the only animals in the world that run on their heels are elephants. And if you want to run like an elephant, go ahead, right? But then an elephant person got a hold of me and said, Cal, that's not right. I'm like, I stand to be corrected.
The elephants were very offended.
Well, yeah, right. So then you're like, okay, but it's just the fat pad touching the ground of the hill. So elephants still run on their toes, people, right? and that's just for sports specificity. So you don't have to do sports specificity. Actually, I don't even recommend it year round, because you'll start to get overtraining patterns. You know what I mean? And that's the thing with coaches, getting back to your point, is that when they walk in, like sometimes everything that they see me do, I'm not saying theirs is wrong, but they'll think, man, if he's right, they think everything that I'm doing is wrong.
Right.
So then they have this, like, and you're going, okay, no, it's not wrong. It might be less than optimal, because brother, I've been there. I met a really smart guy that one day, and molecular biologist and PhD, okay? And we're sitting at a bar. It just happened to be at a bar.
just
This is
happened to.
just the first one I ever went into. Well, when this guy walks in, I start listening to him, and you could tell his dialect in the bar was different than everybody else. So I said, all right, I got to figure this guy out. So I started talking to him, and I'm like, all right, what's your degree? And he's like, oh, molecular biology. Well, I'm like, probably a PhD, right? He's like, yeah. And then he tells me a story how he quit medical school after the first day because he realized there wasn't very many smart people in there. So I went, oh, this guy's, yeah, and he's a genius. So, well, the point with him is that, and I could go on and on about him, but he told me 6 words that he says can change people's life. And I'm like, really? And he uses them all the time. He says, I'd like to change my answer. So if you got some information now that you think your whole world's correct, but then somebody gave you a piece of information that might change your whole world, and you accept that everything you know may be wrong, then and it's actually pretty humbling, because if you're arguing with somebody and they give you a piece of information, you go, oh, I'd like to change my answer, and you're willing to accept that, they're okay with it. The argument usually stops right there at that point. So, I mean, the hard part is people's egos to say, hey, maybe I've been doing this for 15 years and I wasn't right. It's the best I got, though. I'm going to change it, though, now that I know it's not, not correct, and we'll try to find the most optimal way to do something.
And I mean, and since the inception of Triphasic, there has been a lot of different changes and
advances,
advances and everything. So it's not just a piece of paper and this is that, and it's set in stone. It's always a morphing program, changing due to introductions of things like RPR and all sorts of other stuff that have come along and pushed things forward. So I think that's really important for people to kind of know and understand that it should always be changing. If you're not, you're left behind, and you're not going to, especially in any sort of an athletic situation. If you're stuck in 10 years ago, you're not winning usually.
No, not even close. And that's kind of, I like to say I'd like to do it for the kids, but I want the kids to win.
Right.
And that's why, that's why I'm here. And look, I've never won a gold medal. I've had athletes that won gold medals, you know what I mean? But I've never won a gold medal myself, and I don't care to win a gold medal. I'd rather right now, do you want a gold medal? Like, I don't know what I could win a gold medal in, to be honest with you. Some drinking game maybe? But ultimately, it's about, I'd rather just be in the background and help them win. You know what I mean?
Jesse just mentioned RPR. What is RPR?
RPR is basically a self-care system that it's used as a series of reflexes in the body to make instant changes in you, so that you start to reduce your injuries, recovery time, and we saw guys today, athleticism could improve because they're functioning at a higher level now. Instantaneous change. The story for me, RPR, I found it a number of years ago. I kept it quiet. I kept it a secret.
When you said you found it, like you found some literature?
I found the inventor of the B-activated system, which is Douglas Heel, a South African PT, and he's involved in RPR. And what transpired was I saw this, and I called a guy named Chris Corfus, he's also involved in RPR. And Chris was using Triphasic at the time, so I called him up. He's like, hey, Chris, this is Cal Deets. And he's like, who? I was like, Cal Deets. He's like, hey man, I use Triphasic. And I went, okay. And I've heard that before, obviously. And he says, well, I'm a high school coach and I do this. And I'm like, all right. And he's like, yeah, I got some pretty crazy results. He's like, I have 6 kids over 36-inch vertical with Triphasic and RPR and some other things I'm doing. I'm like, what? I'm like, send me a video, because I didn't know Chris at the time, and now whatever he says, I believe, right? But like, I didn't know a guy at the time, and I'm going, okay. So he sent me a video, and he had a kid jump 36 inches with his hands on the hips. You know how many different ways of vertical jump can be. Yeah. And he had 6 of those, and he had 30 kids over like 32 or 31 inches. Sure. So I was like, all right, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to see what this guy does. I don't care if you're a high school coach. If you got that kind of results. And look, these weren't 240-pound middle linebackers in the NFL. These were 170, 180-pound kids, but they're still jumping 36 inches. Yeah. And then you go, and he's got pictures of a Chicago Bear running down his driveway, an Olympic bronze medalist. So he's not just a high school coach. Like, I'm not going to fool you. You know what I mean? Like, he's not fooling me. But anyway, so I went to the RPR seminar with Chris, and I kept it secret. I didn't tell anybody what I was doing for years, because it was just an advantage of mine. And then at one point, Chris and I got together and said, hey, we need to make this something well known, in the RPR. So basically 2 to 3 minutes before you work out, It resets your body. It makes you feel like a kid again. It's kind of what we, because you saw with Mark how when he came in, I wouldn't say lumbering, but he had a pretty good gait. But when he walked after he did it, it was like he had spring in his step. You could tell there was some athleticism there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And not that he didn't have it, but it's just that wiredness. You know what I'm saying? That
It wakes it up.
it wakes you up, and that's what we.
And
have.
it just looks like you're scrubbing a bar of soap on yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're like hitting your chest or hitting your shoulder, your inner thighs, your knees,
Yeah.
all the different.
So
You had a
you're
lot of
using,
different spots.
You're using like a tool.
Just
or
your
something?
hand.
Just your hand.
Yeah.
You can use tools, but I mean, we find that, hey, just do it every day before your workout. And what it does is the reason we felt we had to get it into our coaches' hands is, so for example, Steve Jones, he was a 8-time state champ in football, undefeated, had the longest winning streak in high school football in the country. And he has no physiology background. And we felt that he came to my clinic on a Sunday, went back to his school on the Super Bowl Sunday to get better. He had a clinic on a Super Bowl Sunday,
Right.
drove through a snowstorm to get there, drove through a snowstorm back. Monday morning, implemented it with his school, a few hundred kids.
Wow.
The next day, and he showed it to his coaches, and now that school was doing it, right, after one clinic of an 8-hour deal. And you're going, we can help a lot of coaches. And my big thing is with RPRs, there's a lot of compensation patterns. So as we've talked, I squat in Minnesota when I was overseeing like 500 athletes, and we had 5 kids with knee pains, and they're trying to blame the squats for it. I'm like, well, the other 499 they don't have knee pain. Like, it's not my problem. These kids walked in the weight room with these compensation patterns, and when just squatting was part of the problem that was added on, right? But with RPR, we find we get rid of these compensation patterns, and we have less and less problems. So even though you're a good coach and you got some problems, you don't get blamed for as many of them. You know what I'm saying? Because you get blamed. Like, it's crazy. Like, anybody's going to deflect it. Hey, I've seen it. Like, hey, our guys are a little sore. We're done squatting. I'm like, holy buckets. That's not a reason to stop squatting.
Would you maybe say that RPR maybe just gives the body access to what it should normally have anyway?
Yeah.
Something along those lines?
Well, and the reason is I think we're so stressed nowadays, Mark, right? Kids are stressed. I mean, even like 10-year-old kids that have Omega Wave with heart rate variability, and you're going, why is this kid so sympathetic, right? But it's a self-brought on stress and parents' pressure, social media nowadays. I mean, we think we have to be perfect all the time, and I think that's a big part of it. There's no doubt about that, right?
Yeah.
So,
And it just gets worse and worse, and just builds on the compensation patterns. Just build and build and build, and I mean, especially if it's directed or brought on by one person or one event, and then it just kind of it just keeps rolling and just keeps getting worse and keeps getting further and further hidden underneath compensation patterns and just movement that they're trying to do. And a lot of times they're trying to, and they just keep running into the same wall. And then to kind of remove that wall for them and just show them that there's an easy way to access the door that's right next to it, is it just opens up a lot of people's eyes really, really quickly. And they have some amazing results, not only in the movement but also just some crazy emotional stuff. And even at the seminar that the first seminar that I was at 4 years ago, whenever that was, there were some people who would do these wake up drills, and they're just like, bro, my eye is like, I'm seeing light for the first time. It's super duper bright. And we're like, we didn't turn anything. There's no difference in the lights. There's no difference going on. So it's pretty powerful how little you actually do and what you can kind of get from it over
Can you
and over again.
explain one? Because I'm still trying to, like you said, like rubbing, like I'm still trying to put my
We can just do them right here.
Yeah, so basically,
No, seriously, yeah.
like basically, you can just take your thumb, and what you'll do is you just run down let's say the middle of your sternum right there. You feel those bands in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are some part of this, but you're going to go a little higher, go all the way down, and basically this is part of the breathing one.
Just
and
go up and
Yep,
and
yep,
hard.
just
try
like that.
Try and nasal breathe while you do it as well. Big belly breaths.
And there's a series of about 13, and what it stands for is reflexive performance reset. So it's a reflex that you're hitting to release the diaphragm and open up the tissue in your breathing mechanism, so that with each breath you get a little bit more oxygen. Yep, right underneath the ribs. So right here, as your ribs come down, just get on the edge of your ribs.
Kind of come into the center. Here, find there, start there, and then kind of rub underneath the ribs all the way around.
Okay.
Probably more up and down.
Yeah, dig in there.
Where it feels uncomfortable is probably right where you want to feel. Okay, and the thing is, we've seen people. So the benefits, like one of my Olympians I had, she was a 3-time Olympian doing a bike workout. She always had 160 on the bike workout. That was her heart rate with the set watts. And if she was tired, it'd go to 163. She knew she was a little fatigued. If she felt really good, it might drop down to 158, 157. She did her RPR for the first time, jumped on the bike workout, and the same bike workout with the same watts, she was at 140. And it didn't change. She dropped 20 beats. Why? Because it just put her whole body. It opened up, it opened up a lot of blood vessels because she was a sympathetic type of athlete. So she was really stressed and her nervous system was always active and hot, I would say, in a stressed state. This calmed her down, opened her breathing up so much that she became so much more efficient that her workout dropped to 140, and that's where it stayed. And then she started climbing up a couple weeks later, did another RPR session, went right back down to 140.
And you said it stayed that way for a few weeks.
Yeah, it stayed. Right? So one session did that. Now, we recommend to do it yourself daily all the time, but that was just one of my examples, especially when I first started using it.
And it's a full body type thing. You like do it all.
He had like 12 points or so.
12 points that you hit. So it's a pretty, and I did it really fast. But I did it in the gym in a minute 40 seconds.
Was Charles Poliquin messing around with some of this stuff, or was that different with some of the stuff he was messing with?
Oh, it's all along the same guidelines, I think, a little bit. But this is, like, when I first saw this, it was more of a complete system and an explanation. Like, this explains so many reasons why people got injured. You know what I mean? So, for example, your tendonitis in your elbow, right? Or in your brachialis. Well, when I saw you walk, the way that you were walking with your hands kind of rotated inward towards me, so I saw your palms as you were walking, I knew that your lats were off. And then when you have to do back work, your arm will actually do more work. So I knew you had either bicep tendonitis or tendonitis.
Bicep tears.
Yeah, bicep tears you've had. This is how your body compensates, right? So in order for you to train hard, even though you had compensation patterns, well, something was turned off, so then you compensated, right? And here's the beauty of this. Many people don't understand. They think, you got Olympic gold medals there, Cal. She's got to be perfect. Like, no. They're the best cheaters in the world with their body. That's why they can do what they do, okay? So you were a great compensator. You just had that compensation pattern. Eventually, that's what broke on you. You know what I mean? But you were able to perform with it. So I've had Olympic gold medalists have compensation patterns and still win golds. It's okay. It's going to happen. But eventually at some point, there's going to be a breaking point, right? And and the beauty of RPR is that you can help get them out of those compensation patterns so they can perform the way they're supposed to. And they can perform and keep repeating effort. And like so they're saying, okay, fitness levels go up, but I'm a power lifter. Well, here's the beauty of it. I use the example of one of my elite wrestlers. He'd do one of my French contrast sets, right? His heart rate would be 200. And like 50 seconds later, he was down to 65.
So French contrast is a heavy set of heavy set followed by an explosive set. So
Yeah,
it would be
so-
a heavy back squat
Right.
followed by a broad jump or something.
It's
correct?
basically for me, it was a heavy back squat set. And then you do 4 hurdle hops, and you might grab a 60-pound weight and do squat jumps, 4 of them again, and then you do maybe 4 hurdle hops again. So that's a whole complex. And when he was done, it was 200 beats. And then he was 60. I'm like, all right, you can go when your heart rate gets 90. That was like 45 seconds. And he's like, I'm a 63, so I can go.
After 45 seconds.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
But that is just now this tells us why, and I've had a number of coaches agree with me on this. They're best athletes, and this is an overall general statement. If they get up to 200, the best athletes can drop their heart rate to extremely low, faster than everybody else, and then they go back in the squat rack, they get jacked up, ready to go, and then they drop it again. Now, here's what transpires over time. That high heart rate in the squat rack's fine. It's when you get out, if your heart rate doesn't drop it down, guess what you're not doing? You're not recovering for the next set. So as Mark and I chatted, like, if you're doing 8 sets and you have an athlete whose heart rate gets to 200 or 180, and then in between it never gets below 120, by your 8th set, you're going to be fatigued no matter what. But you have an athlete that can go from 200 or 180 to 80 and 60 or 65 in between those 8 sets. The 8th set on that person is going to be much superior, and each set of training becomes greater quality, right? That's one of my secrets. People kind of look at my training and say, well, how'd you come up with this? I'm like, like potentiation clusters or using clusters, you're just increasing each quality of each rep. If you're trying to get strong, you better have a lot of good quality reps to get strong, because you can't train when you're fatigued. I mean, that goes without saying.
Nsima, I would maybe say it's a little bit similar to like when you were in here powerlifting, how in between your sets, a lot of times you would like meditate.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the other people in here, they don't have that ability. Like maybe they don't have some of the genetics, maybe they don't have some of the experience and some of the knowledge that you have. And so therefore they're just thinking about the next crazy song they're going to put on. And if they might need another dose of their pre-workout, and they're getting hyped and they're staying tense and tight. Meanwhile, someone like Nsima is probably getting more efficiencies, bringing that heart rate back down, calming himself down, thinking about what needs to be done. And then on top of that, every single set, every single rep, every single workout, and you start adding that up over a period of time, that's when you start to really see the distance between the athletes.
I used to, and here's one of my mistakes. I used to get my athletes, like in some of my programs. So I run a high volume program, like you lift 5 days a week, and it's high volume, lots of sets, and I would get them amped up. But the problem is you couldn't sustain it, right? Because you would eventually burn out. This is what the Omega Wave was telling me, where if you just did your work unexcited in my type of program, a high volume, you had to do that program unexcited. You went in, you destroyed your set, but you didn't get excited.
Yeah.
We used to call it like death ground, right? Where, hey, you got to move this weight because your little sister's caught under the bar, right? You can't do that all the time. Now, you might have to do that in a powerlifting meet going up, but you're not running a high volume program at that time, not for athletics. And the reason, and Mark and I chatted about the high volume program, the reason I like it is I feel in the weight room I can do a high volume program and I have to do less conditioning then, right? Because the volume. And when I say high volume, we're talking even my little exercises and my big exercises, I'll do 70 sets sometimes. Now we're talking about a rotator cuff is one set, right? So it is, or neck, right? So it is what it is. But
it could be squatting, as you were pointing out. You could be working a neck in between, rotator cuff in between, right?
Yeah, all that stuff. So that's when I say 70 sets, that's where we're at. But to me, I'm able to work conditioning levels in the gym and not have to condition and beat people up. Because if I got a condition, then it takes away from their strength training benefits.
It's another stress, too.
It's another different stressor. And that's the one thing, like, people may not pick this up in my book, but I switched to training for time. So when you come to my gym, I don't train sets and reps. I train for time. And it helps me manage your stress. So, for example, if I'm going to do a heavy bench for 3 reps, it may take me 6 to 8 seconds. That's the alactic system. But then I go run, in a football program, I might go run 200s or let's say 400s. And that takes me 45 to a minute or even 35 seconds. You're in the alactic system. So what happens is now you're adapting to 2 different energy systems and you don't reap the full benefits of each of them. Okay. So then let's say, I'd say today, guys, we're training for 5, or let's say 10 seconds. That's the short sprint, the alactic system, okay? People say, okay, so I'll train for 10 seconds in the gym. Then what do you do for conditioning? I run for 10 seconds. I push a sled for 10 seconds. That's it. The theory is do you think you could get optimal results if you as a person decide to train for a powerlifting meet and a triathlon at the same time? It's not possible because you're pulling the organism in too many different directions. So, and I saw that out of Europe.
Yeah,
like
bulking and cutting at the same time. How do I get bigger and stronger and leaner? You're like,
It can't, it's not possible, right? And I saw it out of Europe, like articles from 50 years ago, they were training more time. And I talked to my track coach. I was like, Phil, like, why are they doing this? And he's like, well, the theory is that you match up the track with your sets in the weight room so they could not like overlap. So if they were doing short sprints in the track, they did short stuff in the weight room. And I'll be honest with you, I found that people think I got greater results, but I could also do more stress because you could actually do more specific stress than if you do just general stress all over. Your body doesn't know where to send its energy. But if you have a very specific stress, and when I say that, let's say the sets are for 7 seconds today, everything in your body adapts to 7 seconds. Your brain, your heart, your lungs, your vascular system, your blood, everything adapts to 7 seconds. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
That's a little long.
I know.
That is a little long.
Yeah.
So, but you can go twice. So, but you see the theory is that you actually don't pull the organism in too many different directions
In each workout.
in each workout.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can do so, but here's the thing: like my pros, so hockey athletes, people think, oh, you must do a lot of lactate sets. I actually don't, because I found that most of those guys came back from their season and they had cortisol issues because they're in lactate all the time. So we trained I switched over probably about 8-9 years ago to training for time, maybe 10 now. And I only had my hockey guys do lactate or alactic sets, so short sprints under 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them went back and got greater results on their lactate threshold because I think we got them stronger and more powerful in their lactate. So they didn't switch over to the lactate as soon. So their lactate testing improved, and they didn't do lactate all summer because they got better at the alactic system that's underneath it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You get stronger, so the intensity is just less of that exercise. And their VO2 max went up. It was pretty crazy. And I didn't know why. I was thinking, but I still don't know truly why, but I just know that I got greater results where we trained under 10 seconds. Because if you get going after 10 seconds, you start to release a lot more cortisol, okay? And then what follows cortisol? Insulin levels go up, store fat. And that's why these guys after the season, these hockey guys, they're skinny fat. Like they're skinny through their face, but they got all this fat down here by their belly. You're going, yep, they're skinny fat. And they had that problem, and that actually helped training. So I don't really train many sets unless it's sports specific for a particular reason near a competition.
Yeah.
For anything more than 10 seconds.
Got it. Also I want to see if we can touch on this for athletes that want to start applying certain things. We talked a little bit about RPR, so people can Google that, or do you have something in like your Triphasic system explaining more about RPR, or is that a whole certification?
That's a whole certification that we have right now. We have a coach's certification, and we're coming out with a user model where it's a like $50 model, I think, so that you can take the course in like 30 or 45, 50 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. Versus the online model. We had coaches. I think we did a really good job of that. And I think it's better, to be honest with you, because you can replay the information and you have access to it. Where you go to the course and it's a fire hose of information.
It is.
And you hear it one time. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's $300. But I think, for the general person like a dad who maybe, or somebody just wants to take care of themselves, find the individual model, and that's probably where you would go and take that. So it's nothing too crazy.
Now, when Jesse was like telling me to do it, he was telling me to nasal breathe, and we were talking a lot about this in the break room. I found massive benefits of that, and I wish I knew about nasal breathing while in college, because I think I would have been a much better athlete. But you were talking about all the benefits. So what have you seen when you fix athletes' breathing? Because I think breathing is one of the simple things that can help a lot of powerlifters, martial artists, just general athletes that don't pay attention to it. I know it's a big topic, but
Yeah, well, like hold your breath for 5 minutes and let's see how that goes. If you don't think it's important, right? Let's be honest.
yeah.
Yeah, give it a shot. I dare you. Yeah, we'll watch it. Can we film this? That'll be great, right? But like, so a powerlifter. Well, yeah, but I don't have to breathe in powerlifting. But you breathe the rest of the day. That helps you recover. And if you're mouth breathing, it's a sympathetic breath. It's a stressful breath. Okay, so you never get into that parasympathetic state as deep as you could go. Okay, so when I say the parasympathetic, the calming state. So you're either getting chased by a lion or you're resting under a tree, right? So the stress state is that sympathetic state that you're getting stressed or chased by a lion. You might run through a briar patch getting chased by a lion, and there's a bunch of roses in the middle of it. You will never smell those things. You'll never know they existed. Why? You just won't pick up that information because you're so stressed. Now, you get away from the lion, you calm down, and you get in that parasympathetic state. You may smell the roses that you ran by, and they still may be on your skin. You know what I'm saying? But that's the point, is that there's many times where we don't realize how stressed we are because we're just trying to survive with all the stress that's in our, from the lights, the lighting, driving a car, the whole thing. So breathing through your mouth, if you're a mouth breather, like you're in a stress state. A lot of people with PTSD, I've monitored heart rate variability. They're always in a stress state. I find a lot of them are mouth breathers too. You know what I'm saying? That's not, I think the PTSD is causing the mouth breathing because they're in a stress state. I'll be honest.
I remember at one of the Summer Strong events, you were working with a SEAL who had said that he hasn't been able to breathe out of his nose for like 10 years. He'd fallen down a mountain in Afghanistan or something along those lines. And you actually did Beactivate or RPR on him and slapped some tape on his mouth and told him to go for a run. And he almost had a panic attack. But while it was over his mouth, he started to breathe through his nose and he started to cry. And then he took off for a run, and then he came back and he was like, that's the first time I've literally breathed out of my nose in over 10 years.
Wow.
And I mean, that just shows how much stress, A, that he was under, and B, that he was never able to recover from. Now, I mean, he saw some really awful stuff, and some awful stuff happened to him. So we're not going to go ahead and say, how dare you be stressed about it. But it just shows, how much your body will react to that stress, even though you may not know about it. And this guy was jacked. He looked awesome. He was very, he could do a lot of stuff in normal. He was a very successful dude as well, but he hadn't breathed out of his nose in 10 years.
And the problem is that so look, he goes and trains. It takes him longer to recover because his body's in a stressed state, breathing incorrectly. So, and then breathing through your nose. There's bacteria in there that causes a vasodilation in your blood vessels, so your tissue can recover better. Yeah, I tell my athletes to tape their mouth when they sleep, if they sleep with their mouth open. If you don't wake up with a wet mouth, you're breathing through your mouth, okay? And then you should breathe through your nose majority of the time. And people want to drink more water because they're dehydrated, but yet if you breathe into a mirror with your mouth, you can see all the moisture coming out, but you breathe through your nose and there's a lot less moisture, so you don't get as dehydrated during the day, okay? Athletes who breathe through their nose can control their breath and their heart rate much, much better. That's the first thing is I get out of the squat rack, remind them to hit a big breath and walk to their next station. That's a big deal. They have to. Most of my athletes do it all the time.
When we say a big breath, you mean a big breath through the nose?
Through the nose, into the belly, yeah.
Okay.
And I'm a firm believer in breathing through your nose all the time unless you have to go into your mouth, okay?
Would you, so kind of off topic a little bit, and this is something that I've always wondered about, with the advent and the popularity of CPAPs coming in to that everyone's using, would you attribute, is it, I know it's not good to stop breathing while you're sleeping, but would you attribute most of the magic that people kind of have from actually the actual nasal breaths and that sort of being able to kind of drop you into parasympathetic tone, therefore be able to get better REM sleep, et cetera? That's going to probably be more of the mechanism than the actual
CPAP.
The CPAP.
Yeah. Well,
I know we can just kind of theorize about it, but it was always something that I wondered because I used to use a CPAP for a long time and I hated it. But like whenever I could do it and I would have to like knock myself out and I would be able to go ahead and get sleep, I would always feel better. But then I started using the tape and people are like, don't do that. You're going to die in your sleep. Not only was I able to get better sleep, I lost about 12 pounds in about, a week and a half or 2 weeks.
What?
Yeah. And it was such a violent swing of a change. I was like, holy
Probably
shit.
better sleep, right?
Oh, a ton better sleep.
Way
I
better.
feel way better.
And then your cortisol throughout the
Yeah, absolutely.
everything
And
gets
this was a really crappy time. This was right when I wasn't able to get a hip surgery that I needed to, and I was in a really bad spot. So it's probably the worst time to try and change something, but it made such a huge difference. It bridged that gap for me until I was able to get the surgery, and it made life livable for that moment. I haven't slept literally a night without it on since. So I've always wondered, like, really, what is the magic? Is it the CPAP? And I had the fancy machine, everything, and then I just slapped them duct tape on my mouth, and I'm all good, right?
Well, the one of the big things with athletes too is they drink so much water that a number of my athletes reported, my pros were like, yeah, I drink a lot of water and then I get up like 2 or 3 times and it ruins my sleep during the night, right? So, but when you tape your mouth shut and you breathe through your nose, there's a bacteria in there that releases an actual antidiuretic hormone. So then you don't get up and pee as much at the night or at all. So I had a couple 2 to 3 times a night peer that then went to 0 and they got better sleep. When you wake up in the morning, bladder's full, but you go.
Yeah, it helps block. I think it's called hypoxia.
Yeah,
I think is what it's called.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So it's crazy, but why are we breathing through our mouths? Because our mouths weren't developed. The theory is that in third world countries, right, that the kids breastfeed for a long time and everything's developed in their mouth correctly, so then they don't have those problems. That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
With the athletes in the workout, are you having them breathe in and out of their nose?
Yes, when they can. Yep.
as much as possible. Then what happens when they just
They
need
just switch to their
need
mouth.
break,
Like
they
if they're
need to-
sprinting or something, they
Okay.
just switch to their mouth.
But at that point, it's almost it's a natural switch. You just let that happen.
Yeah.
You don't try and say, okay, at the third time when you're starting to raise up in your sprint, I want you to start to breathe through your mouth. It's just like, hey man, just go. Just go. And I think that's kind of the part of the magic of RPR. You're not going to say, okay, do all this stuff now. I need you to really think about this while you're squatting, while you're moving, etc. It just kind of happens.
Yeah.
And they all kind of the domino effect. They just fall the way that they're naturally supposed to fall.
Sure. Exactly. And we talked about overcoaching. Like people want to coach too much, in my opinion, and then people lose people lose sight of what do you need to do. You need to destroy the bar. You need to move that thing as fast as you can. But if you give them 15 coaching points, remind them to do something that they already do well,
right?
The bar slows up by 20.
And you told me you studied that.
Yeah. Well, we did an experiment where literally 15 guys, they all did the same thing. One rack, we said, move the bar as fast as you can. The other rack, they do singles. They go from one rack to the other. It took like 30 minutes to do. And the other rack, we give them 5 coaching points with move the bar as fast as you can in the middle, or the third coaching point. They were 20 to 30% slower on the rack with the 5 coaching points.
Right.
And I'm like, we got to stop telling them, because we're trying to be good coaches. And this was like 15 years ago. We're trying to be good coaches, right? And I'm going, we'll remind them to do this, this, and this, and this. And it just doesn't.
It'd be interesting, like, and even one rack with no actual coaching cue other than just like some motivation. Like,
right?
Hey, let's go, or you can do it. You're gonna smash this, right?
And I think with the one rack that was, hey, move the bar fast, that was our motivation, right?
Right.
We said the same thing, but it was in the middle of 2 other things. It went right over their head, right? Because we were like, do this, do that, do this, do that. And we gave them all 5 coaching points.
Knees out, chest up. You're like,
right.
I mean, we could also just say that that's just stressing the athlete more than anything, because now they're trying to overthink and they're trying to feel their way through it, opposed to letting it actually naturally happen.
Well, that's the big thing, because if you start thinking about stuff,
yeah, you're fucked.
Everything slows
I always
down.
tell people the strongest people I know are the dumbest people.
Well, it's
You
like,
know what I mean?
No,
Yeah.
I mean,
They're not thinking while they're deadlifting 900 pounds.
No, there's nothing.
No.
I mean, you could die theoretically.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But you sit there and you go, okay, when these people are overanalyzing stuff, and you just get all these things on your mind, you can't perform, and it becomes automated. Like if I'm playing the piano, not that I can, but if I was, you know what I'm saying, it would be nice. But like each keystroke, I don't have to think about something like that. It just happens because it's automated. If you have to think about something all the time, then it moves to another area of the brain. And I knew sports was played in the area of the brain that each word on my mouth, I don't have to think. The piano keys, throwing a baseball, you don't have to think about all these things, right? When you start thinking about, then it goes to a different area of the brain.
And
to my understanding.
And I'm just rereading either Why Zebras Have Ulcers, and Sapolsky actually talks about that a ton, and it really kind of hit with sex. It's a parasympathetic thing. Once you start thinking about it, it goes sympathetic. Your dick goes soft.
Right.
Like that's just the way that you operate. If it's just naturally there and you just go and you do what nature's told you to do forever, you got it. You're cool. Once you start thinking about it,
You're pushing rope.
we got to get where you're pushing rope. There you go. That's a technical term, right?
Something's what I've heard about.
But that aspect of not thinking, especially, I found that especially when I've focused on, or not focusing on it anymore, but nasal breathing, when I picked that up, I don't know, a while ago, it's much easier to not think when I'm doing jujitsu or whatever. And in that not thinking, everything's fluid. Everything's just second nature. So if athletes can implement that
I think it just helps you get into that kind of flow state that people talk about it. Things slow down, and you can kind of the things just happen the way that you've been trained to happen. Like, okay, cool, I know this guy's going to roll here, and he's going to do this, and I'm just going to wait for him to do this. Sit back, right? And just I'm just pull this collar, and there we go. And then they're like, that guy his face didn't even change. Nothing happened. You're a stone cold killer. Wellborn, when we were there 2 weeks ago. There was another football player he actually played against, and this guy would just he was LT slapping himself, getting nuts. He goes, I hated going against John because John looked like a serial killer. he was just like this. He was like,
and John was a multi-year All-Pro.
Oh, he was I mean, he was
a
12 years NFL guy.
Yeah,
and you would just look at him, and he would just.
Yep. Oh yeah.
He'd just look at you, and it was really interesting because that really hit home with John, and he was talking about it. He goes, somehow early on, he just figured it out. Like, I couldn't maintain that sort of crazy state. People are smashing their heads into walls and just beating each other up. He goes, you can be a mass murderer or you can be a serial killer. Like, who's more successful? It's going to be that serial killer, because every time you're just going to be you're straight stone face. I'm here to do my job, and this is what I do. And the other guy who was a football player, he was like, I hated it because I couldn't get him out of his kind of Zen state where he would just look at me and just like.
John's really intelligent. I mean,
Cal
Berkeley.
Yeah,
Right,
Berkeley guy. He's a really intelligent guy. But I mean, this is something that he picked up long ago, and he would always say that, where he was just like, just gonna go murder people. Like, oh my God, that is so much more frightening than someone jumping up and down.
He's pretty calm until you mention Warren Sapp.
Oh yeah,
And LT, yeah, yes.
He gets emotional.
He played with those guys.
Yeah.
Against them, I should say.
Yeah. His best story against LT, he was just like, I was handing him his lunch just over and over and over again, nothing. He goes, and then I woke up on the sideline, and I had no idea what happened. And then, someone's waving a smelling salt in his face. He's like, wait, where am I? What happened? He's like, oh, LT just knocked you the fuck out, man. I'm like, oh man, I have no idea. So he's like, I was doing so good. I thought like, oh man,
I'm owning this
guy. And then he said, I woke up, a couple plays later on the sideline.
Well, that's a hazard.
Well, I mean, I mean, he's a hazard. LT's a hazard for sure.
You're mentioning how you don't do that much direct conditioning, but it sounds like your actual training is the conditioning. And you mentioned to me that you did mention briefly that you did like 70 sets, but you do a lot of different exercises in a given workout, and your workouts are no picnic, right? I mean, they're fucking hard.
Yeah, they're high intensity, high volume. The intentions are pretty high. The heart rate gets up there, and then it drops a lot. So, yeah, I mean, it was crazy that, like, one day I had a group of coaches get together, and they called me, and I chatted with them on a Wednesday, and they're like, well, what'd you do today? And I'm like, okay. So my kid did, like, 60 sets, and he went out and ran 20s, and it was based upon how many 20s you run? And I said, well, he ran until he dropped off. So if he ran at 2.7, he would run 20s at 2.7 or until he dropped off to like a 2.85, so it just added 3 or 4%. But they were like, okay, and then, well, what was your conditioning? I'm like, wait a minute, we just did 70 some bouts at 7 seconds in duration. Like that was all he needed. His heart rate, his aerobic thing on his heart rate reading was so high. I'm like, he doesn't need any more. And we do that 5 days a week, and we don't stop. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. And then if we did any too much conditioning, they're like, well, why didn't you do any like 300s or something? I'm like, because the aerobic enzyme, when you kick the 300s in, will minimize his ability to recover, like the mTOR enzyme.
Right.
And it offsets it. So you're pulling that organism. Now, if I was going to condition him, he would need to come back either 5 or 6 hours later or do it in the morning.
So if you're trying to work on explosive stuff for the day and you try to do endurance stuff as well in the same day, you could be minimizing the results of both things, really, right?
Mm-hmm. And the only way I think that it works well is for my athletes that need to do both. So I've had a few athletes come to me like, I'm out of shape, I need to get going. So they'll do aerobic in the morning, fasted for 2 hours, because that AMPK enzyme will activate for 2 hours. I mean, there's literature either way, but we would do that for 2 hours, and then they fuel up, because during that time frame, fasted with maybe some whatever AMPK activation, some coffee. They go 2 hours without eating, then they carb up, they get some protein. A couple hours later, they hit their weights, and we've gotten some pretty good results out of that to get both in shape. And that's the way you got to sequence it. You can't do it the other way, because the weightlifting enzyme, the activation of that mTOR enzyme lasts about 18 hours, so it'll stay activated longer. But the fitness enzyme, and it's like with the vegetarians, I think one of the reasons is like you actually don't activate the mTOR enzyme, which is the enzyme for building muscle and so forth. Where I think being a vegetarian with that type of protein, it doesn't activate that enzyme. And I do some fasting mimicking stuff. Have you guys ever seen those diets?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that really it shuts down the mTOR enzyme, and that's the one thing for muscle building you need. But to do both, be in shape and have muscle, like to mix it up, you got to do your cardio in the morning fasted, in my opinion. It doesn't have to be hard, but to burn fat or get in shape.
Yeah, Corey Schlesinger, when he was here, he mentioned these fasting mimicking diets. And just so everybody knows, a ketogenic diet mimics fasting, but this is a little bit more specific, where you don't eat that much food, but it's a way to eat something
Yes.
while still mimicking some of the benefits of fasting,
Yeah.
correct?
For 5 days, and actually eating what they prescribe, you actually got better results than the group that fasted for 5 days. So you get better results, and we're talking about insulin sensitivity. It kind of resets a number of these things
Right.
with your body. And I actually, when do I recommend it for my athletes? I only recommend it postseason. So let's
What's
say
the name? There's a company that specifically, I'm
Yeah.
sure there's more than one, but
Yeah, if you search the mimicking fasting
Yeah,
diet,
you
you'll
go.
Prolon,
Okay, yeah,
Prolon.
right.
And what
Just
happens?
keep in mind the studies, I think, are by them. So
Yeah, right, exactly.
it's always good to keep in mind.
But regards, fasting works well.
Right.
We know that, and
Absolutely.
I just know I wasn't gonna go 5 days with fasting right now because it's not that important to me. So I tried that diet, and it worked a little better. But the only time I recommend my athletes to do it, because really we're training the rest of the year, is like postseason. So they're gonna drink for a week, and then the second week I usually have them do that, and then it sets them up for their GPP, their fitness cycle, where I bring them back and they do their fitness model with the nasal breathing and all my circuits that I do. So I recommend that that mimicking fasting diet, and you don't have to buy the kits. You can go to the store and buy all the food too. I mean, it's on the internet on how to hack that, so you don't have to actually buy their.
Have you noticed any large differences in performance with athletes when they switch to certain diets?
You know what? The low carbs are tough for like hockey players, because I mean, I used to megawave a bunch of hockey players during the season. And
Oh, and real quick, I don't want to interrupt you, but you
Yeah.
mentioned Omega Wave so many times, and we did talk about
Yeah.
that, but people are probably wondering what Omega
and
Wave is.
Omega Wave is a device that you put on, and it measures your heart rate variability and your brain waves, so DC potential coming out of your brain. So in millivolts, and it really just gives you an idea of where you're at and how much energy you have and how to train that day. So an experienced athlete, once you teach them, can probably feel how they are, need to train that day. Hey, I feel a little crappy. Okay, we're going to do more aerobic based stuff, right? So whatever, bodybuilding, light bodybuilding. But then, so to that point, I guess, where were
The hockey players.
the hockey players, yeah.
And the carbs,
They would, they would switch to their wife switched to a keto diet, and their Omega Wave readings went horrible. And I'm like, and they're paying me to figure these problems out, and they didn't tell me they switched, right? Anybody that cuts the carbs out on a high performance sport, like for longer durations, not powerlifting, but let's say a hockey or you're running around.
And this is during season.
During season,
Yeah.
I don't think you can. I just, they have a harder time recovering, right? And I like those. I actually recommend keto, especially during the base training phases when you're trying to build an aerobic base. I think you get greater results, okay? But once you get going into that glycolytic and you're in season, I think you have to have carbs to recover optimally.
I'd also say too that most of the time when anyone tries to do any diet, I mean, these hockey players are human. They're probably like, hey, like I want to lose a little chub, and they hear that their wife's on a diet, so they jump on it with them. They're probably just eating less food too.
Sure.
So obviously the carbohydrate deficit probably isn't helping, but they're probably also just not able
calories.
to get to the same amount of food, especially because the team that they're traveling with might not have the nutrition that they are trying to seek in the first place, so they might not just eat and things like that. It might make it really more challenging.
Yeah, nutrition's hard. I mean, because it's tough for everybody. I mean, you got to, in my opinion, you got to do a series of tests and all kinds of things to make sure that you get it right for yourself.
I think it's the one case where you might want to try to overeat.
Yeah.
Like if you're trying to perform on a high level, you would probably rather have more nutrients rather than less.
You better have more if it's your job.
Now,
to get a little fat.
A while back, maybe 2 years ago, the last time we were chatting, you were talking about having different nutrient profiles for different parts of your triphasic method. And I haven't seen anything that's come along. Have you kind of scrapped that because of just the individuality of everything, or is there still more isometrics you need more? I think it was you were just really load up on the fats and where you know.
Well, no, I have it. I'll probably produce a book here later.
Okay,
but like during the eccentric phase, like I mean, there's like various amino acids that you need to recover from. Like you people can look it up right now if you want to go through and hey, recovery from eccentrics. You look up like prolon, glycine, various types of amino acids. You can look up all the nutrition, and then what stressors in the isometric phase. Yeah, I mean the nervous system is really taxed. So like Relora during that particular time will help you recover from an intense supermaximal loading of isometrics, in my opinion. I've seen it work. So sodium loading at that time is probably pretty important too. Okay, because I've seen a lot of, and, you know, I think who's made sodium loading a little bit more mainstream.
Stan Everett.
Stan. And I remember Derek Woodsky and I were talking in like 203 where he gave us an example of a buddy that did 80s for 5 because he was cutting, and then he sodium load the next day, and he did and 2 days later he did like 140s for 12 on dumbbell, and that's as good as he could get, was like 80s for 6 or 5, right? And I started playing with sodium loading back in 204, and I'm like, holy, there's something to this. You know what I mean? Especially athletes that don't eat enough sodium.
Right.
Oh, you just can't. Well, it's the signal coming out of the brain to tell the muscles to fire. It's all involved, potassium, sodium. You know what I mean? So, so and then different phases. Obviously, like you can go into various energy system stuff. But yeah, I have a whole thing about foods. Like I'll tell my athletes, because I can't give them those amino acids, so I tell them to eat chicken wings during the eccentric phase, right? Because of the cartilage and right, there you go. So that has more of the.
We just needed a reason to eat more chicken wings, Cal.
That's
all I was really asking.
Do eccentrics.
I wish I would have just got right to it.
Yeah, right. Sorry about that. In a roundabout way.
You were mentioning having a way of testing athletes to see whether they need to work more on speed or more on power. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So it's a free website. It's Performance Made Simple, and there's and I took 20 years of various numbers of the 10 and 20 yard dash, which is the key indicator. And I have timing gates that do that. If you don't have those, and you could film a side view and kind of do it with a particular video, you could download an app that tells you the time. And they run a 10 and 20. And I was able to match up, Mark, that 2 kids had the same time. 1 kid was strong, 1 kid was weak. And it told me that a kid, due to their 10 time based upon their 20, needed more strength. So I took all these numbers and started comparing. I mean, we're talking kids from 15 years ago. And he ran this 10 time, which is still fast. And I'm looking at him going, but his back squat was only 270. And then 2 years later, he ran a 10 time or 20 time. It was a little faster, but his 10 time told me that he needed more speed. And he back squat 380 now, 390. So he was strong enough at 180 pounds. So what I've done is I have a formula on that website, Performance Made Simple, that you can plug in the 10 and the 20 time and see, it'll prescribe to you whether an athlete needs strength, power, or speed. So here's the scary part with this whole thing is you track your athletes through, and I had coaches do this. So they'd say, okay, every 2 weeks they test the kids 20 to see what they're going to train that week. So my kids run in on Monday morning, they'll run a 20. That have all these programs printed out. And whatever that formula tells me, that's the training they do that week. What it is it's a rate limiter indicator. So your weakest link in the state of your body right now, it tells me what it is, and that's what we train for the next 2 weeks. So with this being said, the typical periodization model, do you know how many? So this thing just told me what they need to do. You keep track, and then you watch what their plan was after the summer's over. The typical periodization model that we've all been taught for the last 60 years. Do you know how accurate it was? This was me, my athletes and other athletes, other coaches.
It was good.
20%.
Oh,
20%. And that's what keeps me up at night. Like, am I doing the right thing? And after this summer, I'm 20-some years in the game and realize I was only right 20%. The typical periodization model that I use for everybody uses and Triphasic follows was accurate 20% of the time. Guess what happened? I had 30% of our athletes and other coaches' athletes, roughly, if you would have flipped the model and did it reverse, it would have been a better model. We would have been more accurate if we did what the experts told us to do reversed. So then there's another 50% in the middle. They were just a mixture. So they'd go strength, and they'd go speed, and they'd go power. And you may see some patterning in there over time. But every 2 weeks, we change their program based upon that. And the beauty of it is I have 2 athletes that ran the same time, but they had different programs. And that's when they thought, oh, this is individual. Of course, yeah, it's individual.
I found it really interesting when you were on the glute ham raise. You were like, this is strength, this is power, and this is speed. And strength was all the way on the outside, and your foot placement was all the way on the inside for speed. Why the different?
Well,
what's that representing?
Well, what happens is when you run and you accelerate, you have a wider stance. So coming out of the blocks, you have a wider stance.
They
right?
take up almost the whole lane. So
Yeah,
sometimes people get
right.
DQ'd for it with the bigger
Right.
legs and stuff.
So, but you're traveling slower at
Right.
at a less speeds, and you're trying to accelerate more weight. So in the glute ham, when we do that, that's why we would do the glute ham at a wider stance during a strength phase. But then a speed phase, your foot's more underneath you, and that's why we have a more narrower stance at that phase. And then the power phase would be in between those, so we split that difference. Yeah. So what I'll basically do for people at some point. Now I've released all these training zones too. It's on that website, but I'll also match up the key exercises that I think are important for each zone. So if you say, all right, I got to train in the speed zones, here's the key exercises that have developed. Like for example, for hamstring or in glutes, have you guys seen like people laying on bands? They put them across the rack and they do that flutter kick. I think there's one on Barstool Sports that said it was like a sperm or something. You know? To me, I have about 400 of those exercises used, but to me, that's the speed one for the hamstring and glutes during my speed phase. That's exactly the exercise I do.
I haven't seen the exercise. I need to see it.
Yeah.
I actually used to call them temper tantrums. Because,
Yes.
And it's something that I did this a long, long time ago. I would lay on the ground and put a Swiss ball kind of at my butt, and I would just kind of do this because I would just feel like, God, I just don't have any sort of like, that extension is really, really gone. And I was a sumo deadlifter. And then I would lay down on the ground, have somebody hold a Swiss ball, and I would just kind of kick it with my heels for as long as I could, or until I felt like I would, like the power would just kind of, go down. And then I would try and do 3, 4, 5 phases of that, or sets of it, over a 2-week period. I felt when I hit that 3rd or 4th week, I could really start to feel my speed on all my pulls start to come back.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to kind of see that come out. And I think that was born via Triphasic stuff. When that kind of came out, I was like, oh my God, I actually might know a little bit of what I'm doing here. This is actually kind of cool.
So the key is that, and people are like, well, this tool is kind of like cheating. I'm like, well, what do you mean? They're like, yeah, well, it takes your weakest link and it tells you in your training. I'm like, well, the goal is to win. It's not cheating, right? I don't know how it's cheating.
Yeah.
I just identified what your weakest link is, and then we fix it. So what you do is you actually progress athletes faster. So what we saw was that they got faster over the course of the summer than they've ever done before. And then we actually got that difference between where they started and ended was much more faster, larger gap because they're more complete now.
So it seems like it's taken us kind of many decades to get out of the dark ages of strength training and have people finally, start to identify and realize that a lot of the old methods that we had were incorrect. And you showed us there with the 20% inaccuracy. But do you think that might be something that has led us to kind of put our hands up and say, hey, bro, like, I don't think sport-specific stuff matters at all. Like, why are we trying to worry about what position we're in on a field? Someone like Louis Simmons has been quoted as saying, like, don't really worry about that shit. Just make your athletes strong. It sounds like you have a difference of opinion because you're still, you're saying that it looked like the methods that were being utilized were maybe incorrect and not necessarily the exercises.
Correct. Now, you still need to get strong, right? We know this, but you need to get as strong as fast as you possibly can, and then do the more specific stuff. And to me, sports specificity, doing a RDL with a one-arm dumbbell and like one leg, I'm like, that's not sports specific. Like it's slow. I like fast movements. Plyos is more sports specific to me, right? The way you were squatting with a lighter load. I know that my track athletes, when I used heavy weights, moved slower, especially when they were supposed to run fast. Now people say, well, what's his name? So-and-so, he would do 3 heavy.
Ben Johnson squatted 600 pounds.
Right, but it was 1 or 2 sets, which caused a huge hormone release, which helped him run faster. It wasn't the squat itself. You know what I'm saying? Right. So yeah, and not that Louis is wrong, but you need to get your athletes faster. But I'm just telling you, here's the hard part. I see a guy who out there says, "Oh, I'm a strength coach, and you need to come to me to learn strength coaching." I'm like, okay, but you've never trained one athlete. You squatted 1,000 pounds, and I have a whole team full of women that'll beat your ass in a 20-yard dash. Because I see how you walk. You can't even walk. How are you going to run a 20-yard dash, brother? My whole team of 20 women will smoke you in a pro agility and a 20-yard dash. So who, like, you know what I mean? And it's crazy because they make this claim that I'm an expert strength coach. Like, well, you may be a good strength coach or expert for powerlifting,
right?
But not for training Olympic gold medalists. Like, I don't care. Like, and it's just like, okay, well, that's good. But if you want to, we can put it on YouTube and we can run a 20-yard dash against any of my women. They'll smoke your ass in a 20-yard dash because they're running 2.8s. And I don't think your chunk ass can run a
Well, I think a lot of times too, people are training so hard toward one thing is to the detriment of other things.
Of
So,
course.
like I love strength training. I love training the way that I train, but it's been to the detriment of other attributes that I've may have been able to keep.
Yeah, I
or
mean,
improve upon.
or any athletic quality, right? Like, you want to try to squat a grand, it's not going to help your golf swing. There's nothing about, you know what I mean? It's just two different spectrums,
Andrew,
right?
that's false news, right?
Right.
He's got fake news about my golf swing. It's not very pretty.
Watching Mark, his golf, that was like
All
the
right,
most,
that's
Is
enough.
it reminiscent of like Charles Barkley when he swings?
Yeah.
Because that
well, now a
You
little bit smoother.
look that up.
Yeah, that's really bad.
That is.
But yeah, you're right. So, and not that I'm lifting on like a coach, because I know a lot of great powerlifting guys that are great strength coaches. Like, I'm not getting there. But when you make that claim and you've never trained an athlete and you think you got all the answers and you want people to do it a certain way, like, and Mark, when I say 20%, like that model was still good for 20% of the athletes. That was optimal. But we've messed up, or we've been less than optimal the other 80% is what I'm saying. So we were right for 20% of them.
Right.
But the other 80, we were less than optimal. Let's just optimize it all. And look, use that tool. And if you find a better way, just let me know. That's all I ask. Like, I don't keep stuff secret. I think I share a lot of information. I just want to make sure that my athletes are getting the best results.
And I think so many people need to keep in mind here that, this is still a very young discipline that we're talking about. It's, less than 200 years ago, doctors figured out that they need to wash their hands before they deliver babies.
Right.
And it surprised 100% of the time, these kids didn't come out with these horrible diseases, because back then, to be a doctor, you played around with cadavers all day, and you played around with, and you had a bunch of just dead cells in your hand. And then you go deliver a baby, all sorts of problems.
Mother dies,
Infant death.
baby dies.
Yeah, everyone's dying. They're like, man. Someone goes in there and washes their hands, they're looked at as a witch. Like, why are you doing that? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Yeah. And now you can't walk into a hospital without, someone throwing some antibacterial stuff on you. Yeah. So, I mean, the world of strength and conditioning, especially at a high level, we're looking at 80 years old, maybe, right?
And it's really only, I think it's got a lot better in the last 20 to 30.
Right.
But we're still in the neophyte stages, let's be honest.
Right. So there is
nutrition is the same way.
There's no axioms that are, that are going to be broad worldwide. We're still figuring these things out, and it's still kind of moving. And if you're not moving along with it, you still haven't washed your hands yet.
Or asking hard questions that you're going, man, if when you ask hard questions, you may not have answers, and you may realize that you're not doing something right. And my best coaches that I've ever realized they weren't doing something right, so they looked for something better that created stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, even though they win a lot, but maybe it's just your best athletes walk in the door, and that's why you won. They won in spite of you. You know what I mean? I'm hoping that's not the case with me. That's what I'm trying to do, right? That I was part of the process. I helped direct them. I know I've done that. Like David Plummer, he won a gold in the one Olympics, and you were like, we knew what he had to do to peak, and 6 weeks out from the gold medal race is what we had to do. We knew in the weight room we had to do the sperm kick thing, right? Or the
tantrums, yeah.
And we started that whole program, and he knew what it was to in that finals race. It was to the day that we started that program, but we knew 6 weeks for him to peak. Other athletes might be 2. You know what I mean? But that's the art of coaching. Like, everyone wants to make this a science. There's still an art to this whole thing.
So I wrote this down, and how do you set kind of a tone and intentions when you're coaching coaches or telling people how to kind of take some of the stuff and use it? What are your cues to coaches to help the other kids, or, to help their athletes, et cetera? Because a lot of times there's so much buy-in with your program, and the coaches are on board, which makes the athletes on board. How did you come to, besides being in this and realizing that you can be wrong and being open to it and having conversations, like, what do you tell someone who comes to visit and then heads off and was like, hey man, this is how we've done it, and this is what we've seen, this is how I would apply it? Or do you say just try your best?
Yeah. Well, the hard part is like, as deep as I am, you can't do what I do.
Well,
right. I mean, from training with time, you can't walk in and see what Cal does and on Monday implement it. Like, there's no, like, it's not possible.
Right.
Like, matter of fact, if let's say I left Minnesota and got a new job, I can't implement what I do right now. It would take me a year to get it all going. You know what I mean? Because it'd just be a complete change for everybody. So I tell them to take the basic stuff like, hey, here's the best exercise I have, like the split squat. Here's some other ones. What problems do you have? And I tell them how I fix those problems.
Mm-hmm.
Try the triphasic, but make sure they got a good base going into it. Like you just don't jump off the couch and go do triphasic. Like that doesn't make sense. And then just here's the basic concepts. I usually give them like my high school manual that I would recommend. There's a free one out there. But yeah, you're just sitting there going, so you can't be what I am after 23 years. You can't do what I do, right? And we all know that. You can't get rid of my experience and how to make decisions. And my interns are like, we've seen you change your whole philosophy on one exercise in a split second, and everybody changed it because I came up. Well, like the glute ham and the foot thing, like, this is what we're going to do, people. And they're like, you're going to change everything? I'll change it right now. On a dime, I will throw if you tell me there's triphasic is the worst thing ever and you find something that's better, I'll throw it out right now. We can be done with it, right? I'm not afraid to do that, right?
Yeah.
In other coaches, it's just hard if they want to try to do it all, and you can't. So just start it in parts and just go from there. I give them the most important stuff, you know what I mean? And then just have them go. So and I have an open door, so people are allowed to come and see I'm okay. So yeah, it's tough, right? Because you can't, and you don't know where they're at. So I don't even know where they're coming from. That's the hard part. So what do I give them? Like obviously you would walk in, I'd show you everything, tell you everything, but like I got a high school coach that walks in, there's only so much I can give him.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah.
You know, earlier before in the podcast, you were mentioning something about, I think, the best athletes you've ever seen have really strong feet and really big butts.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like when it comes to the feet side of things, what did that mean exactly? And how can athletes tell that that's an aspect that they need to improve? Because like an example is when you see people sumo deadlift, a lot of people just don't know how to root their feet into the ground from the bottom. Yeah. So what can athletes pay attention to there to figure out that link?
Well, one of the biggest links is that the big toe needs to grab the ground and squeeze and press into the ground when you're walking, right? Or when you're doing exercise. So any extension exercise, when I say that, so on the way down, we tell our athletes to lift our toe up to work the extensor
on the way down.
Arch on the way down. And then when they go to reverse, you squeeze that toe super hard into the ground and try to break it. And that'll help that glute grow. And we have a video of it with Mark. When he was on the table, I pushed his glute down really easy when the glutes were dysfunctional. And all he did was curl his toe up, squeeze it hard, and it turned the glute on instantly. And he could hold me off the table with his glute. Yeah. And I could probably have pushed him down with really one hand pretty light before that. So the big thing is, it's just like one of my athletes, he was a super freak. He was like 6'5", he's a thrower, 6'4", about 260 at the time. He had a 44-inch vertical, 14-inch or 14 size shoe. And I'm telling you, his feet were so thick. And I saw that this was back in 204, 205. I'm like, and he was just wired. I mean, he could do a 3-6. If he was a violent human being, he could have played defensive end in the NFL for sure, right? Yeah. But super nice guy and loved throwing, so that's what he did. But you're going, and that's when I started noticing, like, he has super big feet, strong too. It's not that they're big, it's just that they're strong, right? And we have video of the spring ankle exercises that we did today, and those are one of the fastest ways in the 5 positions to strengthen the feet to get rid of knee pain problems. A lot, not all knee pain, but like many knee pain problems. Because as Mark identified, he's the first person ever in these conversations. He's like, the only thing that touches the ground is the feet. So if your feet
all day, every day.
If your feet aren't touching the ground correctly,
unless you're doing jiu-jitsu,
right? If your feet aren't touching the ground correctly, then you're not going to have the optimal patterns and everything happen. So, a friend of mine had an uncoordinated daughter. He felt like she was 11, playing on some good soccer teams, but he was shocked how much she improved by increasing the strength of her foot. And let me talk you through that process. Every time her foot, when I checked it, every time her foot hit the ground, her arch collapsed. So the entire feedback loop of her learning skills was affected by the fact that the arch was on, or her foot wasn't stable. He did that and he felt by the end of the summer she was a completely different kid, a completely different in as far as athleticism, not her mind, obviously, but athleticism, because now, and she can learn skill faster, because every time she steps and runs, she's learning. And as you said, if you're running and trying to accelerate and you're short stepping, I find a lot of times it's a foot problem, because your body doesn't want to let you extend out and get in a bad position with a bad foot. So it'll put that foot underneath you more. So there's many limitations that the body, and we talked about this in our videos today, that the body's wired to protect itself. And if your foot's bad and not strong enough, it'll actually downregulate your glutes and legs to push into the ground less, so you can't injure yourself. So a lot of limits are your foot's not strong enough, and your brain downregulates the muscles. You get this. So you fix the foot problem, there's a lot of things that can be transpired. And as far as athleticism.
Got it. And I'm guessing in like the triphasic system, it goes into some stuff on that, or on
I have
the
a
website?
speed manual.
Speed manual.
My speed manual, yeah, it's pretty impressive in regards to the results that we're getting from those 5 exercises.
And I think if you look up like ankle rocker on YouTube, you have a lot of actual stuff about this like online, and I mean it goes through
my YouTube page.
It goes through extensively about like not only the 5 positions but exercises, implementation, when, where, how, etc. So it's not like he's hiding it; it's out there. So it's really easy.
Spring ankle is one, and then the spring ankle is the exercise that I did with Mark today, and then this ankle rocker is another thing. How we need to push our knee over our toe when we do exercises.
And most people are like, don't do that.
No, I know, but in
They're scared of it. Yeah.
in my in my YouTube page, there's a picture of Barry Sanders making a cut, and I'm telling you, man, his knee is about 12 inches in front of his foot, and he is making a nasty cut.
No one could move like him.
No, right? He had an ankle rocker, and same thing with like the old story with Walter Payton running up that hill in Chicago. How there were guys that couldn't even run up that hill, and they're like, how is that possible? Because their ankles weren't mobile enough to support them at that angle, so their body would raise them up, and then they couldn't run up the hill because they would go straight up and down. They physically couldn't do it. But he could get his ankles going up the hill so deep into his position and still be strong enough to run up that hill.
He'd say he ran up that hill every day until he threw up, and they were like, well, eventually you get used to it, right? He's like, yeah, when I get used to it, I just do more. I just keep going until I puke.
Yeah.
Every time.
But that was an
That's what made
indicator.
him such a savage.
Right? That he was a savage.
He was fucking
Greatness.
savage.
That's why you have the name Greatness,
Yes.
right?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
Sweetness?
Sweetness.
Sweetness, yeah. Greatness, it doesn't matter.
Same thing.
But the foot was, you look at those guys run, and it's scary, the positions they were in, and able to hold it. Because like Barry Sanders, and being in one of those positions, if his arch collapsed and his foot wasn't strong, it would instantly pull his knee back, and he would have to run higher. But he could change directions because he had such strong feet. I'm sure today, if you would have checked everything.
He's got big old quads too, and
Oh,
hammies.
yeah, and hammies.
What you got over there, Andrew?
No quads?
Ouch. Earlier when
Tough crowd.
yeah, I know, right? Earlier you were poking me and making weird random spots hurt, but then you did ask me, you were like, does it look brighter out here? And I'm like, I thought it was just because I had my eyes closed for a second, and then I opened them, and then all of a sudden I was like, what's happening? So can you explain why the hell that happened to me?
So your vision system kind of opened up because you had a shift into the relaxed state. So your pupils were closed because you were in a stressed state, just walking around. You may not have seemed stressed, but you were. And when we did the right breathing and the RPR exercises, you actually calmed your nervous system down, your pupils dilated, and you were actually taking in more light. Like the lights hadn't changed, but you were taking more light in because they were more open and you were in a relaxed state to take in more information. So that's the part where you just ran through that patch of flowers in the middle of a briar patch where you were stressed from the lion, and then you calmed down, and now you can smell the roses that you ran through. But that was your body saying, hey, I'm in a stressed state. And ultimately I've been able to shift myself with a few of really high quality breaths.
That was wild. And then so you were helping me out with my back, and I've had back issues. People who have been listening to the podcast know that. Can you explain the part about like my ribs being a certain distance away from my hip? Because I've never heard that from anybody either.
So when you laid on the table and I your lowest rib. If somebody's sitting in their car right now, listen to this, they can just feel the gap between their bottom rib and their hip bone. We like to say about 4 fingers. And I tell this story. I had a 6'5" professional athlete leave me with 5-finger gap. And he went to a team where they did, and they don't train a whole lot in the NHL just because it's so hard of a season, 80 games and travel. But they did a lot of core bracing. And I saw him skating in January, and I texted him because I knew he had a problem. He said, "Yep, I'm in pain, and I got some things going on." I'm like, "All right, we'll send somebody down," because I didn't have time. And within 2 weeks of that text, he never got back to me. He blew a disc out. And when I checked that spot, so he left me with 5 fingers. He was actually, that rib had went down, touched the hip bone, and then slid inside it. So that was the difference. And he was a 6'5" athlete, right? Yeah. So, and I feel that was the reason he blew his disc out.
He just got like compacted.
And in my opinion, and we got some video on this, it was a brace in the core caused that problem in that athlete. So
Him actually trying to brace
his
the
core. And they told him to brace his core when he skates. That's what you should do. And I'm like, okay. Just my opinion, it's not a great thing.
Yeah. So for the people that are listening that did check, what can we do to help fix that?
I use RPR, Reflective Performance Reset, right? You can dig in there. There's a video of me putting you on the bench if you want to show that, or maybe hook a link to it.
Eventually we'll be able to show it. Yeah.
Hook a link to it, where we had you extend and then just rub in between there, and it loosens up that whole area. And then the biggest thing too is if you're breathing, like the breathing's so bad. Well, I think the research came out where 80% of the people in this country have dysfunctional breathing patterns, where they chest breathe, where and some of the worst people I've ever worked on was yoga instructors or Pilates instructors, because they brace their core all the time. And then dancers, females that have been dancers for like 40 years of their life, they walk around with their stomach sucked in. They were taught that as little girls. And it seems like they have back pain all the time. So those are some of the worst people I've ever seen as far as being locked up in that area and the ribs setting on top of that hip bone. So it's pretty scary. And then you lose lumbar flexion, right? Your psoas isn't working. It's pretty crazy, this whole combination. You've seen it, Jesse. It's crazy how scary it is. And in my opinion, breathing can help start to release this. But you were chest breathing when we were talking now, but you had just shifted to a belly breath, and that's why the lights seemed like they got brighter. And if you keep breathing like that, then tissue starts to release. And that's the thing. If you just breathe correctly, tissue starts to open up across your whole body and things start to turn on.
To show people how stressed they are, I would like for everybody that listens to this show in the next couple days, keep track of when you're like, holy shit, I'm very, very relaxed right now.
Yeah.
I doubt it'll even happen once.
Seriously.
Right? Like if I go to the movie theater, that's like a time where I can kind of think of like, wow, this is like what I'm supposed to feel like most of the time. Like, this is fucking cool.
Yeah.
I'm with my kids. I'm hanging out.
Not in your
I'm
underwear.
not. Yeah. Well, sometimes. If it's warm in there.
Yeah.
But just very relaxed. Not on my phone. Not thinking about work. Not trying to train. Not trying to be better than anything. Just trying to do something mindless and just fucking hang out for 10 seconds.
10 seconds. Seriously.
Wow, 2 hours.
No, but that's what we can't even get 10 seconds in, is my point.
Right.
You're dead right on that. We're so stressed. Yeah, it's a tough one. And then a lot of people say, well, I can go right to sleep at night. It's because you're extremely exhausted.
And it's our own doing too. I mean, we live in a great world, where most of the people I know have a refrigerator full of food. They got a freezer full of food. They got a pantry full of food. And they should be pretty grateful for a lot of things. And I'm including myself in this as well. But, and we just put there's just a lot of undue stress, like where we're just always trying to, which is cool. It's good that we're trying to be better. It's good that we're working on it. But at the same time, got to chill the fuck out every once in a while.
That's what we don't do. Well, I mean, I thought this was a pretty good day. So, I mean, there's nothing stressful about this stuff.
Today
so
was fun.
Yeah, I had a good day here, man. It was awesome. We got to eat some meat with a side of meat today.
There we go. That's it.
What I want to ask you real quick is, because there's probably a few athletes listening, when you mentioned that he blew his lumbar out or blew a disc because of bracing his core, when most lifters hear about bracing their core, they're like, well, I have to do that when I squat and deadlift. So what should they be paying attention to about their overall movement when, I guess, lifting and outside of lifting for the dysfunction you're talking about?
So let's say Mark goes to squat 900 pounds and he pulls it off. I don't think overemphasizing bracing the core. like your core is going to stabilize itself if everything's functioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be tight anyway. Because if he had 900 pounds on his back, his core, you feel his muscular down in the abdomen area, it's going to be tight.
Mm-hmm.
Don't overemphasize it.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
And it also has to relax in order for you to hit a squat position.
Exactly. Right. And the thing about core, like if you're actually overemphasizing bracing it, you're promoting flexion while you're holding weight on your back when you should be promoting extension. That is my big thing. And then you can just test some exercises. Well, how about this? Listeners, brace your core and do push-ups to failure. And then wait 20 minutes and brace your glutes and do push-ups to failure and see what happens. You'll do more. Pull-ups, the same thing. Same thing. Yeah. Give it a shot.
Okay.
Yeah. It's crazy. Well, and it's like the kipping movement in pull-ups. I know there's internet police out there that hate that. But I'm like, if I was going to push Jesse right here, what I just do, I had to brace my glutes to push him. If I didn't, I would fall over. But then if I go to pull him, what I do, I brace the other glute. So, and if he's going to stop me, you have to brace your glutes in every movement, whether it's flexion, extension. In my opinion, I find the athletes do they move the bar speed, even in bench press. Here's one of my things. You can check 100 athletes do bench press. You bench press, brace your core, get the bar speed. You bench press, squeeze your glutes. The bar speed was faster, only 100% of the time.
Only?
And I'm not a mathematician,
inaccurate.
right? But I mean, anybody can try it. Just
Yeah.
get a Tendo or a Gym Aware and put the bar speed and have somebody do something and measure the speed with your core braced. It slows them down.
Got it.
Yeah. And I was like, hey, run a 40, run a 20 with your core brace. And it looked like hell. So we're not doing that. That's what I always. And then I always mention that, hey, when these core bracing books came out, sports hernias went through the roof in sports. There's been research show that. They didn't match the dates up, but like
Right.
I matched the dates up.
You know, it's really funny you were mentioning this the other day. I was doing some good mornings, and I was like messing around with the bracing, and I noticed when I was bracing like really heavy, I was like, ooh, my back, that's not good. I had to relax a little bit, and then like the movement just felt like the way it should. So it's really interesting because I didn't really pay much attention to that, but it makes sense.
Like why are we over coaching and trying to put them in things and activate stuff that doesn't really need activated? Because your body will activate it super fast if it needs it. It'll protect itself. You know what I mean? And does his core need activated as much as somebody that's, novice trainer? No, because his muscle patterns are set. Yeah, he's dialed in, right? So yeah, it's I think we do overcoach too much at certain things, But and then I just let this out of the bag. I'll be honest with you, like when people see my athletes run, like I truly believe, I don't coach running, I watch it. But so for example, when Mark would run this morning with his lateral sling being off, his arm would sneak out. I don't coach running because I don't coach running sport now, but it's the greatest indicator of a problem that's going on in the body. So if you're running and you have an arm that's sticking out, if I turn on your lat and it puts it in, I know that was a problem. If that wasn't it, then I go to the hip. That wasn't the hip. Arm's still out when you run. And I'm not coaching you to hold your arm in, because most coaches say, hey, hold your arm in. Well, you coach a world-class kid and you're going, hey, you got to run down the track, run super fast, but hold your arms in. No. It doesn't work. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with them by watching their running and seeing what's indicated, and then see if I can fix that problem. Does that make sense? So you see an athlete run, and you'd see him internally rotate his leg instantly on impact. And I'm going, And what's everybody think right now? They think, oh, the glute med's off. Actually, it's a protective mechanism to protect the groin from blowing up. So when I got the kid on the bench, I checked his groin. His groin was weak. We work on his groin, get his groin activated. Guess what? Internal rotation never happened with the kneecap. So when he was running, it was an indicator that there was a groin problem, and the brain turned the internally rotated the leg to protect that from running or tearing the groin while you run. Point of groin, basically.
Got it.
Does that make sense? I mean, I have a bunch of those, but like I'll get those out in the next 10 years, maybe. So.
Next 10 years.
Where can people find you?
I'm exoathlete.com, Cal Deets at Gmail. I mean, I won't get to all of them. I try.
You're on Instagram. You're on
Cal Deets
YouTube.
at Gmail. My YouTube page, Triphasictraining.com is another website, so they can find me at those places.
Got any seminars coming up or
I haven't.
anything like that?
I have a couple in Montana. Nothing. One in Montana. I'm trying to. We got a lot of stuff to develop with RPR content, so I'm trying not to speak as much right now. And Chris and I are putting together a bunch of good stuff. We got level 3, pretty much level 4 laid out. So
Nice.
of RPR, like you guys saw some level 1 stuff today. But
Yeah,
you can see it. Maybe we should host one out here some weekend.
that would be great.
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
I think
we'll host
people would
something.
love that.
Yeah, that would be great. So, perfect.
Mr. Jesse Burdick, where can people find you, buddy?
JesseBurdick@gmail.com. Jesse Burdick on all socials.
Google Maps shows him.
Yep.
Every time I
You
look
can see
in on
his
him.
head.
Yeah, you can see his head.
What's up, Andrew? Where can people find you?
The Google satellite can just you always just see.
You can always see me. You can always know where I'm at.
Just Google his name on Maps. It'll show up.
What's so weird is if you actually type in my address, I'm right in front of that camera.
Are you really?
Yes, like I'm right in front of it. And you can actually find me on Google Maps if you know my address.
Can't miss them. You guys can hit me up on Instagram at I am Andrew Z. Please make sure you're following the podcast at Mark Bell's Power Project. Huge shout out and thank you to Piedmontese Beef for sponsoring this podcast. The absolute best beef on the planet. The only thing better is getting it at 25% off. Head over to Piedmontese.com. That's PIEDMONTESE.com. At checkout, enter promo code Power Project for 25% off your order. And if your order is $99 or more, you get free 2-day shipping. Nsima, where you at?
At Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube. At Nsima Inyang on TikTok and Twitter.
Yo, dude, what were you doing with those squats the other day? Those
Yeah, what's
long-
that all about? 10
Squats.
10 minutes squats?
Yeah, just down there
Oh, yeah.
taking a shit.
Yeah, pretty much I'm just holding 10 minutes or more in a squat position each day.
Did that hurt or did it feel good?
Feels great. Feels great. My hips always feel good. I dig it. Do you think there's a problem with that, by the way? I'm just
fine
curious.
with it. No,
I think it's
no,
okay.
it's great.
I just want to make sure right now that I'm not leading people down a dark hole. So, yeah.
Speaking of a dark hole, you mentioned being in a deep, dark, wet cave earlier. What was the cave? What was the pain cave? You were talking about?
We talked
Oh.
going into an isometric squat or
Oh, that's
something.
what it was.
The pain caves. It's dark, cold, wet, and lonely.
Brutal.
Yeah, nobody wants to be there.
I'm at Mark Smelly Bell. Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch y'all later.